Let's take a closer look at the organization option PDRCPTTO. This option defines the default behavior when a new store is created. If the option is set to WO, the checkbox Direct to WO Default is automatically checked when a new store is created. As you can already see here, I've just created a new store, and the checkbox is already enabled. Alright, I'll save the record now. Then we'll go back to the organization options and change the setting to Held. If the option is set to Held, the same checkbox is unchecked by default, and receipts are handled as held items instead. It's a small setting, but it decides whether direct purchase material goes straight to a work order or first into a held state in the store. And once again, we create a new store, and this time, as you can see, the checkbox is not checked. I'll save this record as well. One important thing to check is that there is at least one bin configured and marked for held items. Now we want to request, order, receive, and finally return a direct material part that is tracked by asset, all from a work order. First, we create a work order and add an activity. This step is important because EAM really wants at least one activity on the work order. Otherwise, it won't let us continue with planning and issuing material. So we add a simple activity just to keep EAM happy and ready for the next steps. Then we go to Parts and plan a direct material on the work order. It's important to make sure that the plan source is set to direct material. I'll copy the work order number because we'll need it in the purchase order. Next, we create the purchase order and fill in all the required fields. Next, it's important to select the correct store and then fill in the remaining required fields. After that, we switch to the Parts tab. Here, we first enter the work order number, and you'll notice that the plan source automatically switches to direct material. Now we can select and plan the appropriate part. Before we can release the purchase order, there's one more important step. We need to create an asset that will be linked to this part. Of course, this step doesn't have to be done manually every time. It can also be handled in the background using FlexSQL, so the asset is created automatically. But for this demo, we'll do it manually. For this, we select the purchase order, optionally enter an asset code, add a short description, and set the department and the organization. Now we go back to the purchase order and approve it. Once the order is approved, we can already create a doc receipt. Here, we enter the order number, switch to the Active Lines tab, and click on Retrieve Parts. And as you can see here, the checkbox is already checked. From there, we can post the line directly, and the material is received according to our direct-to-WO setup. Now let's go back to the work order, to the Parts tab. Here we can see the receipt, and right away, we also see that the part is marked as used. Of course, we can see the same thing in the transactions as well. We can see it here as well. The material was received and posted directly to the work order. But let's also take a look at the asset itself. Now let's look for the correct asset. I used the purchase order number as a prefix, so it's easy to find. We can see that the status is installed. And with that in place, we can now go ahead and trigger a supplier return. Alright, now let's go to the supplier return. Oh wait, not the work order. Okay, here we are. We already know this is direct material, so we enter the purchase order number and select return from work order. Then we switch to the Parts tab and look for the correct part. It's the correct part and also the correct asset. Now we can save it, approve it, and just like that, the supplier return is done. If we want to see how the postings look for this part, we can also check it under Parts in the Transactions tab. Let's search for the part and open the Transactions tab. Here we see the same postings that we saw on the work order. We see one line for the receipt and one line for the return. The bottom line belongs to a different case, which you can tell by the work order number. In this example, we'll show the same flow as in scenario 1, but this time using held items. Here as well, we start by creating a work order and adding an activity. After that, we switch to the Parts tab. Everything here is the same as in the previous example. Whether the part is received as a held item or not is decided by the store selected in the purchase order. Here, we select the part again and set the plan source to direct purchase. Then we go back to the work order header and copy the work order number, just so we don't have to remember it. Next, we go to the purchase order and select the correct store, the one where the direct to WO default checkbox is not enabled in the store master data. This setting is what makes the difference later in the process. Here again, we select the correct work order and the part. After saving, we once again create an asset. Up to this point, the flow is exactly the same as in scenario 1. The difference only starts with the doc receipt. That's where the flow changes. Small difference, big impact. After creating the asset, we go back to the purchase order and approve it. Then we move to the doc receipt and enter the purchase order number. Once again, we retrieve the parts. And here we can already see the difference. The direct to WO checkbox is not selected this time. Now we can approve the posting here. The part is now received as a held item in the store with the status transit. In this case, we want to return the part directly from transit without issuing it to a work order first. That's why we select Return from Store. Everything else stays the same. We select the part, then save and approve, and the part is returned to the supplier. Of course, we can also see this again in the work order on the Transactions tab. Here we can see how the part was received and how it was returned. In this scenario, we go one step further compared to scenario 2. This time, we also issue the held item to the work order and then attempt the supplier return, including the pitfall that comes with it. The beginning is exactly the same as before. We create a work order, add an activity, plan direct material, and then move on to the purchase order. Here again, everything stays exactly the same. We still need to create an asset first, and only then can we approve the purchase order. After that, we're ready for the PO receipt. Up to and including the posting of the part, the process is identical. Here's a quick walkthrough of the asset creation and the receipt of the part into the transit store using the PO receipt. And this is where the difference really starts. Now we issue the part, which is still a held item, from the transit store into the work order. After the store posting, we go to the Issue/Return Part screen. First, we select the transit store because that's where the held item is currently located. Then we search for and select the correct work order. Next, under Actions, we click on the Held Items link. This allows us to work specifically with parts that are still in the held or transit state. Finally, we confirm the posting, and the part is issued from the transit store into the work order. Alright, now we can check this in the work order on the Parts tab. Here we can see that the part has been issued to the work order. And of course, if we want more details, we can also look in the Transactions tab. To demonstrate the first pitfall, let's go to the Supplier Return screen and try to select the part. We look for it, but it's not available. At first glance, this might be surprising, because the part exists and we know it was received. So the real question is, why does it no longer appear for a supplier return? We know that the part is still available in terms of quantity. The reason is simple but important. The part is not functionally available anymore. We can see this when we look at the asset. Here, the asset has been installed under the equipment, which means it is now functionally unavailable. So this has nothing to do with stock quantity. It's about the fact that the part is already installed and in use. You can see this if you select Return from Store. The part appears and the store still shows available stock. But you then get an error saying the available quantity is exceeded, even though stock is clearly still there. As you can see, the logic behind this is quite complex. It's not just about quantities in the store. It's about how the system understands usage, installation, and functional availability. Small settings, small process steps, but a huge impact on the outcome. Thanks for watching. And if this helped you avoid one of these traps, then the video did its job.